What up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Hope everybody has had a good week. Hope you have definitely had a better week than myself. It's been a rough one. I want to start by apologizing for the lack of content, both podcast and written content, even social. Over the last week. I promise you guys I will make it up to everyone. I've never been as sick as I have been over the last week. I managed to get both the flu and COVID at the same time, which I didn't even know was possible. So hey, look at me, the multitasker, pulling off multiple things at once. I mean, you love to see it. It's been brutal though, and we've had to miss some shows. So I just wanted to start by saying I'm sorry. I always hate, when my favorite shows get off their schedule as well. So you guys know that I'll do everything I can to make that up to you, and I'll certainly get some written content on the site this week. We'll be talking hoops. We'll be talking recruiting. I want to start doing some feature work at some point here, but it's been a long one. Got the whole ordeal, cold shakes, a gnarly cough. I do want to say, if you're listening on the audio only side and there's like a pause for 30 seconds, it's probably because we had to mute it for a sec while I hack up a lung. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm going to try my best to not have that happen, just because visually it's not super appealing. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Looks like somebody in the Toyota chat here. Carl says, my little cousin just got on campus. Go Rams. That's awesome. Love to see it. I hope they have the time of their life, man, because there was absolutely nothing like being at CSU. The further I get away from those days, the more I miss them. There's just something special, especially about those early first times on campus and the magic of, feeling like all your dreams have a chance to come true. It's a pretty cool moment in your life. So congratulations to your cousin. I think that's awesome. Also, congratulations to Torrey Horton. Might end up getting a ring in his first season in the NFL. Unfortunately, not looking like he's going to be able to play in the Super Bowl. It's a shame he got hurt because he was killing it, obviously, before he went down. Really been the story of his career to this point. Just the durability issues have held him back, unfortunately, because when the dude is out there and he's healthy enough to give it a go, he's been incredible. It's always cool to see a guy like him, go and prove himself. So it's a bummer in that sense that he's ended up missing half the season and, probably is going to miss the Super Bowl. But I think he's firmly shown at this point that he is good enough to hang in the NFL. His future is obviously very bright. Shout out to Torrey Horton. Shout out to Sky in the Toyota chat. Much, much love. I'm going to get into a lot. We're going to talk about the latest recruits. We'll talk about CSU basketball and their struggles, whether they're able to turn things around or not. It's not the best week to be looking for a turnaround. I'll say that, going to Viejas and Laramie. If you would have pinpointed the schedule, you would have said this would be one of the more challenging stretches in the entire league slate, just based on the settings. But something's got to give with this team, because they're kind of in do or die mode. So we'll get into all of that. I did want to give, if you would spare me a couple of minutes here to ramble about some things that have happened in the sports world, over the last week. First of all, I'm a Broncos fan. If you listen to the show, if you follow my content, I'm sure you're well aware of that. I'm sure some of my audience are Patriots fans. In fact, I know a couple at least are. So I'm not going to get in my feels or anything like that. Vrabel's an incredible coach. That was a tough loss, obviously, for Broncos fans. That game was there for the taking, but I think it's opened up some interesting debates on multiple fronts. First of all, the decision to go for it in the first half and not take the points, it's spurred, a lot of conversation about analytics versus, feel. And ironically, the analytics actually said to kick it in that scenario. But I do feel like we've kind of swung too far the other way with some of the aggressiveness, particularly in the NFL. And I think some of that started in college and it kind of tricked its way up. But 3 points in a tight game, that's a lot of points. And I just think at times these coaches, they outthink themselves. And if you know Sean Payton, he was always going to go for it there. I don't hate the decision. I don't think it was like disastrous or anything like that. You have to believe that your offense is capable of getting 1 yard at any level, right? Like don't line up and play the game if you don't believe your team can get 1 yard. But they got out schemed on the play call though, and it reminded me so much of the end of the UTSA game this past September. CSU obviously elects to go for the 2-point conversion rather than the win, and it ends up getting all these takes both ways. And I think really the bigger issue in both accounts is the play call, more than the decision itself. They got out schemed in those instances. And I like the play that the Broncos went with a hell of a lot more than the Taj Bullock special that we got, in the UTSA game. But it's just funny the overreactions that these types of situations draw. I did think in the moment they should take the points, but Sean Payton is Sean Payton. It's not shocking. The other thing, though, is just the overreactions to the snow. I get it was bad football in the second half. That happens maybe once a decade. Reminded me of the second half of the 2017 border war. Now you've got people like Mike Florio clamoring for the AFC and NFC championships to be neutral site games. There's not an idea that I've heard that I hated more than that. Like, why would you want it to be a soulless corporate snob fest like the Super Bowl? That's bad for football. That's bad for the fans. They deserve the opportunity to see their teams in these big games. It's exactly how I feel about the CFP, guys. Like, I think every round of the playoff up until the national championship should be on campuses, because games are more electric in actual stadiums, not neutral sites where they, can upsell to corporate sponsors and stuff. I just think it's lame that so much of the conversation these days is stemmed around trying to appease these neutral, natural, national viewers, and not appreciating like what these games mean for local communities. And we've seen college football completely lean into that ideology, and it's obviously not something I love. I would hate to see the NFL lean into that same mindset. Like taking the AFC and NFC championships out of home stadiums that'd be a travesty, I feel like. I mean, I had to sell my tickets, obviously, because I'm sick as a dog, but going to the AFC title games with my dad, 10 years ago and 12 years ago, those are some of my favorite, sports memories that I have. Some of my favorite memories I have, with my dad. And I don't know. I hate that, like, we watch these games now and everybody wants change just immediately because of one game. It feels like a crazy overreaction. And then you see it in college football too. We got to change. We got to go from 12 to 16 to 24. Do we though? Do we? I don't know. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. If you missed it, CSU is probably looking for a new strength coach, which is unfortunate. Tyson Brown reportedly taking the job with Indiana, was only on campus here at CSU for a little over a month, although I haven't seen anything that's confirmed that since that report came out from CBS a couple of days ago. The college football calendar is so stupid. It's unreal. But if that does prove to be true, and I assume that it is, I trust CBS reporting, Brown was a strength coach under Curt Cignetti at Elon all the way back in 2018. So they have a relationship there. In fact, Tyson Brown's first full-time strength position was at Elon under Cignetti. So, maybe a really close relationship. But that's a tough blow for CSU. I mean, he was very clearly respected by Mora. I mean, enough so that he was willing to name him the associate head coach. That's somebody that you're putting a lot of value in what they bring to your program. So to lose him at this stage is tough. And that's, kind of the pitfall of the current college football calendar. I don't necessarily fault Brown. It's a great opportunity. Obviously, you have an opportunity to go to play for the defending national champs in the Big Ten, surely getting a nice pay bump. But that obviously screws CSU pretty drastically. And it's just unfortunate that the calendar plays out the way that it is. And I like that college basketball is actually doing some things with their portal calendar and stuff to try and mitigate some of this so that you don't have it all happening, during the playoff and immediately after. I just think it's crazy how we've just kind of accepted the chaos of all of this and not really done much to address it. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens here in the coming months, but that's a tough blow, assuming that he does in fact take that role, and we'll see what CSU is able to do in response. We got some questions here in the Toyota chat. Keep them rolling. When you get to football, what position group do you think you can learn the most about during spring ball, and which group will you be watching the closest? That's a really good question. I think the trenches are where you tend to learn the most about what a team's ceiling is going to be. Obviously, the quarterback position is going to be a big focus of interest this cycle, just because you got Haas Haney coming in. You want to see how Farrar looks, and then you want to see how the young guys look too. So naturally, I think quarterbacks are where I'm going to focus quite a bit. But I mean, games are won and lost in the trenches, and when you see an O-line that's just getting throttled, or a D-line that can't stop anything, that's when you start to get a little worried. And we've seen that at various points. Like I remember in Jay Norvell's first spring, the D-line was having a lot of success, and I thought it was like, oh man, maybe this defense is going to be pretty good. And then you realize pretty quickly it was less about the defensive line, and it was more about the O-line being incompetent. And obviously they gave up a billion sacks, and Clay Millen got his ass kicked for the entirety of the season. So I think those are big areas. I mean, special teams are always kind of interesting. Like I'm less interested in, running backs and linebackers and stuff like that, because you're not playing full speed very, very frequently in those settings. I'm more interested in just how you're holding up in the trenches. What do the quarterbacks look like? That type of stuff. The specialists, I will have an eye on that. You could tell last spring that kicking was going to be a disaster. They go out and get Isaiah Hankins, and you think that it's going to get solved, and then unfortunately it didn't. But I am curious to see what those new guys are going to look like. That's a really good question, and I am very excited for spring ball, which is just around the corner. Crazy enough, it feels like it just turned to real winter because it's been so warm of late. Like it hasn't really felt like we've been in January, but it's going to be here before we know it. And hopefully we're going to get an official roster from CSU soon. I've seen a bunch of other schools put out theirs. I imagine they were just kind of waiting for the semester getting full swing and see who was going to get on campus and all that. But those are kind of the groups I'll have my eye on. Dolph wants to know, can any of those fast, jumpy track guys catch a football? That's a fair question. Bedard has some impressive athletes. Of course, they can run track and not play football at college for a reason. Yeah, I mean, you like guys with track backgrounds, right? Just because that shows a different level of explosiveness. A couple of the guys they've signed in this class, similarly to what Norvell used to do, are track stars. As far as the real track stars at CSU, I don't know if you could actually get any of. Usually they're pretty scrawny. Like those folks are fast, but they're usually pretty scrawny. But hell of a program, obviously. And then Taylor says, do you think we'll get a home and home for the 2026 football season, Texas State or Utah State? Most likely. If so, I would put my money on Texas State if they do end up going with the home and home. I do think they're genuinely exploring that flex option, which could just like try and prioritize the best possible matchups to get the Pac-12 into the playoff. But I do think the home and home, although not very desirable and probably would get mocked, is probably the simplest solution, at least for one season, to filling this schedule quirk you have at the moment. It's really unfortunate that the Pac-12 whiffed on Memphis the way that they did. Honestly, like I'm really excited, to see what happens with all of this, but I'm so exhausted about the hypotheticals and the back and forth with the Pac-12 Mountain West lawsuit that I just kind of want to get to the season and get it going, because I just can't do the maybes and hypotheticals anymore. I just feel like we've beaten that horse to death at this point. Let me take a quick breather real quick, and then we'll get into the recruiting. I know I've been rambling about a bunch of random shit here at the beginning. I'm high on cold medicine, though, so bear with me. Let's take a quick breather, shout out these sponsors, and then we'll keep the show going. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the all-new Tacoma or the return of the iconic Land Cruiser. Toyota has 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, though, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, and that's what really makes them perfect for living around these parts. You can go hit the ski slopes. You can go on a road trip and hit Grand Junction or something like that. You can cruise around Denver and not worry about losing, the all-wheel drive capability or the gas mileage. So dependable, so versatile. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics, and they are the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. I'm also excited to talk to you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Basketball season is here. Got my Nuggets hat on, got the Nuggets hoodie on. I'm itching for Jokic to get back. I'm not going to lie, after the way that things went for the Broncos this past weekend, I think the only thing that can cure my broken heart at this point is to watch Nikola Jokic do his thing in person, and Game Time makes that easier than ever. They give the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. It's incredibly easy to use. Even dummies like me can hop on there, get great deals at the last second, and you know that everything you're buying is 100% authentic. It's the best price. And what I love especially is you're not getting hit up with all these BS fees at the end. The price you see is the price that you are going to pay. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Maybe you want to hit up the Pistons tonight. Last time I checked, tickets for as low as $25. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, we're going to get into the recruiting stuff, which I know is what most of you have tuned in. So I appreciate you letting me ramble about some random stuff at the beginning. Dustin says, I know Texas State wasn't ideal, but I just don't get the need to add Memphis to the pack. That's like adding Michigan to the SEC. Geographically, I'm with you. I also think that the leagues have thrown geography out the window at this point, while the Pac-12 has leaned into it to an extent, and they've been pretty open about that, of wanting, the base of the league to be on the West Coast. And I think that's strategic. I think it makes sense for travel costs and a variety of reasons. But Memphis is the best available G5 brand. They're the best team on the market that could be in the mix, for a new league. They desperately want out of the American. They think they're going to get an ACC invite down the line. They tried to buy their way into the Big 12. That would be my argument to Memphis, would be like, you literally tried to throw $500 million or whatever it was at the Big 12, and they still didn't want you. That's really where all of us are at this point. That's kind of the stark reality of this situation. Is the Pac-12 going to be a power conference based on the old terminology or like how we used to classify things? No, probably not. But I think it very clearly can be the 5th best football league. I think it can be one of the elite basketball conferences. And if you take Memphis, you completely take the American out of the equation. You've already taken the top brands from the Mountain West. You're just taking all the best possible assets at that point. But I understand the skepticism just on the surface of Memphis and the Pac-12, Memphis, Tennessee. But that's where we're at with college sports. Like 20 years ago, I never would have suggested something like that. I never would have even came to mind. But that's where we're at with college sports today. And if you're the Pac-12, you're really just trying to stack as many resources as you can and best put yourself to be in a spot where you are getting into the playoff on a regular basis, because the last thing the Pac-12 can afford is to have this big gamble, to put all your chips on the table and then have a scenario where like Memphis goes 11-1 and they get in the playoff and the Pac-12 gets left out. That would be devastating from a PR standpoint for the league. And that's why I feel like you've got to add them just on top of, you're adding a highly competitive football program and a basketball team that theoretically is going to be great for your brand, although they're struggling pretty drastically this season under Penny Hardaway. Kind of feels like that program has peaked. Also, we have comments saying bring back Stanford and Cal. You'd love to. I don't think they want to come. That's why they were willing to do this ACC stuff, guys. The politics and ego that come into play with all of this, and honestly, there are probably some Mountain West fans that would hear this and roll their eyes by me saying this, because they're going to say, like, how ironic. We're looking down on some of those Mountain West schools that got left behind. Well, there's levels to it, right? Like, the reason the reverse merger was never going to happen in the first place was Oregon State and Washington State weren't going to have it. They weren't going to be associated with the San Jose States and the Nevadas of the world. They already were incredibly frustrated by how realignment had played out. They got left behind. The rest of their league went on to the Big 12 mostly, but a couple Big 10 and ACC teams as well. They felt like doing reverse merger was just optically not something that they could accept. And if you're Cal and Stanford, you got left behind by, Oregon and USC and those type of schools. They feel like they're too good to be associated with the San Diego States of the world. That's, a part of why San Diego State took forever to, get interest from the old Pac-12 in the first place. Like, there's an arrogance and an ego that goes into all of this. And even though common sense would say, hey, Cal, hey, Stanford, instead of shipping all of your sports across the entire freaking country, playing matchups with no history that nobody gives a shit about, why don't you come play teams in your own region? You'd probably have a better chance at being competitive, probably have a better chance of going to the playoff. Cal was pretty good this year. Cal actually seems like they're on an upward trajectory. I would argue, Cal be on the West Coast, you could dominate and have a far bigger brand being, the staple of the Pac-12 compared to an afterthought in the ACC. I just don't know if their ego will allow it outside of having no other options. Stanford especially, just feels like they would try and force their way into the Big Ten or something like that. But you never know. You never know. And that's why, in part, you stay lean if you're the Pac-12, right? Like, you don't add members just for the sake of adding. You obviously had to get to 8 members so that you could be an FBS football conference, but that is part of why, the reverse merger wasn't quite as appealing, because you don't want to be in a situation where you start getting to 16, 18 teams. That's why the OG WAC broke up in the first place, and that's what's ironic about how everything has played out in recent years, is you're going to see some of these super conferences fall apart, because at some point the Ohio States and Michigans of the world, Oregons, those type of programs are going to look around and be like, why are we making the same amount as Rutgers? For a long time, you could say that about Vanderbilt and SEC, although they've obviously had a nice little renaissance here. But the vast expansion, in my opinion, historically, it's never worked out for any of these leagues. And that's why I don't quite understand why, the Big Ten and the SEC have done some of the things that they've done in recent years. And even like Oklahoma and Texas, I know the money is good. They've been competitive. They're making the playoff. It's not like they can't hang with those teams. Is that more fun, though, than like the OG Big 12? Is it really? For me, it's not, but maybe that's just me being biased towards, what I remember from my childhood. That's my own personal biases coming into play. I don't know. We'll see. we'll see what happens with all that. Anyways, let's get into the recruiting stuff. I love how active the Toyota chat is. Keep the questions, comments rolling. I will answer as many of them as I can. But on the show on Monday, this past Monday, which feels like an eternity ago, my brain's been in mush for the last 6 days. But we got a live commitment. That was Durrell Robinson, former UConn and Auburn and Charlotte running back. 6 foot, 207 pounds, good size and speed. He looks like an SEC back. We didn't really have a chance, obviously, to watch him or anything like that. Looked him up live in the moment, seemed intriguing. But then when I went back and I, watched him before I wrote about him for the site, I'm pretty excited about this kid, guys. I think he has big potential. He has moved around a lot. So on the surface, 4 schools in 4 years, don't necessarily love that. But he started at Charlotte as a freshman, played in 4 games, redshirted, goes to UConn, really effective in his redshirt freshman year for the Huskies in 2024, 731 yards, 8 touchdowns. And that was as the team's 3rd leading ball carrier. I mean, he did that on not a massive sample size, 107 carries, 731 yards. That's big time production. And you can see why he landed at Auburn in the first place. Now, unfortunately, he got hurt just the 2nd game of the season, so it never really worked out for him with the Tigers. Not too different from the Haas Haney situation, right? Like, had he stayed healthy, there's a possibility where he's coming back next year as, like the face of the program there. Coaching changes and then other things aside, that factor into all of that type of stuff. But he is a really big pickup, I think, for CSU football. And it definitely makes you feel better about the depth of the backfield. I would say, initially I gave the running back room a C grade, and I meant that as C being baseline, right? C is average, nothing more, nothing less. They didn't fail. It didn't feel like, this was a bad class or anything like that. But it just felt like you maybe lacked a little bit of juice, and you wondered about the depth, given the fact that you lost, 4 guys who were proven, and you were bringing in kind of some unproven commodities, guys that had been in the UConn system, but didn't have, outside of Jayden Mel Brown, didn't really have a ton of production on the books. Now you bring in somebody like Robinson, and him and Brown as a 1-2 punch on top of some of the other guys that you can work into the mix. I think you feel pretty good about the depth of that backfield. He's a patient runner. He's got great size, really runs well for how big he is, got good breakaway speed. There were a couple of runs where I thought, the defender was going to maybe be able to catch him from behind, and dude just outruns him. I like that he's kind of an old school running back, between the tackles, waits for the play to develop, and then boom, explodes through the hole. There's not a lot of cuteness to his game. Has these subtle little cuts, in the open field. The guy's a freight train, and I think that you kind of have the blueprint from the 24 UConn offense on what CSU might be trying to lean into this year. Going through those numbers, Cam Edwards, who obviously was the star this past season for UConn, ended up transferring to Michigan State. He led the team in carries both years, but in 2024, he had 146 carries. Jayden Brown had 118 carries, and Durrell Robinson had 107. So, I mean, that's 225 carries you're bringing over from that offense on top of they got 110, I believe. Yeah, 110 carries from quarterbacks that year as well. Imagine we're going to see quite a bit of design QB runs for Haas Haney. As a team, they rushed for almost 2,600 yards and 23 scores without anybody having north of 150 carries. And I like that because it keeps guys fresh, and it makes you less reliant on one individual. You don't throw out the entire season if one guy goes down. So durability, it is potentially a concern given the fact that both Robinson and Brown got hurt this past year. That said, they're also coming to CSU off of years where they didn't have to put a ton of tread on the tires, so that there's a silver lining in that as well. I think that those two are going to be pretty exciting, and I think being able to land Robinson and have him come back, to play for Mora again is is exciting because to me, you could just look at him and say, 4 schools in 4 years. Oh man, what are we going to get out of this guy? But you look at his trajectory and it kind of makes sense, right? Like he was clearly too good to be at Charlotte. Goes to UConn and produces really well, gets SEC offers, ends up at Auburn. He looks like an SEC running back to me. Like he looks like he has that juice. Now I just feel like he's a guy who wants to be in a position to succeed. You know, he chased the allure of, you know, the bright lights in a big program, and it didn't work there. Not his fault. You know, he got injured. It's not like he couldn't hang or anything like that. You know, they were very much projecting him to be, you know, in the top 2-3 leading rushers for Auburn last year. Is going to be kind of a committee approach, but I think he has an opportunity to really break out here. And there's a world, I think, where he balls out and goes on to the NFL potentially. So I'm excited to see how that works out. I really feel like he's a big addition for the team. Initially gave that running back grade a C. I think you'd give it a solid B now, even maybe a B plus, just because of the continuity angle, right? Like you've got guys that are coming in that have played for you, that are going to be well aware of like how things are going to operate for you, not just from like a scheme standpoint, because that's going to be a little bit different, obviously different offensive coordinator, although there'll be some similarities, I would assume, with Price Tracy from what you saw with the UConn offense this past year. But I just think that the benefit is like they know how you want to operate in practice, right? Like they know how you're going to handle film sessions. Every program has its own little unique qualities. Every coach has their own way of going about things. And one of the tougher things of bringing in this many transfers is a lot of the time, you know, these guys don't really have any prior established relationships. They don't know what to expect from you as a coach. You don't truly know what to expect from them as a player. And that's why I think anytime you can get guys who you've already had in your program, who you already are sure of, you know, and the way they're going to conduct themselves, the way they're going to practice, you know, the way they're going to show up on game day. Even obviously Robinson was a stud in 2024, didn't get hurt this past season, probably would have been a stud in the SEC too. Really big addition for the Rams. I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. Another guy I'm really excited about, flipping over to the defensive side, Caleb Otlewski. He committed Monday evening after Robinson had committed in the afternoon. That would have been, the 19th, I guess, at this point. So it's been a little while. But he started at San Diego State. Brady Hoke then got fired. He decides to hit the portal, ends up going to Montana. Really productive player for a good Montana program these past couple of years. A versatile guy, you know, 6'4", 221. Really moves well for a frame like that. Rangy sideline to sideline. He's an impactful run stuffer. He's got good instincts. But I like that he's a playmaker in pass coverage as well. You know, had 2 interceptions for PBU this past season on top of 79 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss. He would get used in these delayed blitzes in a way that I imagine was terrifying for quarterbacks, because like he drops back, and then when you see this guy coming downhill, you know, 6'4", 221, the amount of ground he covers is really something else. And I couldn't help but notice him being in every frame. Like, you know, you watch Montana, the guy's just all over the place. And I was talking to my good friend Hank, you know, on the DNVR Broncos pod, and he's really excited, or he feels, you know, that Otlewski is going to be a really big addition for CSU. The dude was a beast for Montana, so trust Hank. I think he, on top of the other linebackers that you have, you know, this is starting to shape up to be a pretty intriguing room, and I think that's going to be one of the greatest strengths for the team this year. You know, when you look at, you got Kenyon Aggers coming back at outside linebacker, but now you put Otlewski into the mix. You got Diamande in the mix. You've got the kid coming over from Wisconsin. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. They're putting together a pretty intriguing class. And then on top of that, you also bring in Mark Preto, who's 6'2", 225. Statistically not quite on par with these other guys, although he did have a a 75 tackle season his sophomore year at Fordham, spent 2 years at Fordham, then 2 years at Northern Illinois. Only ended up playing in 2 games in 2024. So I'm assuming he comes over with 1 year of eligibility, but possibly 2. 30 tackles in 14 games with Northern Illinois. I really liked his clips from Fordham. I didn't find a ton from his time at NIU, which was a little surprising to me, because watching some of the stuff you saw from him at Fordham, he looks like a guy that translates. He's athletic. He's got good instincts, sideline to sideline. He covers a lot of ground. I mean, seems like a sure tackler. Maybe not quite as physically imposing as Otlewski or Diamande, but I think he's somebody who could be an interesting option for you. And with the way he moves, especially, I wonder if there's an outside pass rusher in there. I'm interested to see how it works out, but I really like these linebackers that they've brought in, and I feel like that group is really starting to come together pretty nicely here. At corner, they just brought in Caleb Presley. He was a 4-star prospect out of high school who had interest from everyone. Oregon and Washington were bidding over him back and forth, ended up flipping to Washington late. He's a Seattle kid, so it was a big storyline. Kalen DeBoer was actually hyping the hell out of him back in that 2023 early signing window, which we don't have anymore. Thank God. I hated that. But he's saying things about how he can be a foundational member of their program and, the type of local recruit that transforms things. Offers from Oregon, Bama, Michigan State, Arizona, you name it. All the blue bloods in college football, they were all after this guy. Now, it hasn't quite worked out for him collegiately in the way that he would have hoped. He's only played in 3 games for Washington over 2 years. Got hurt a bunch his freshman year, though, and I think that really set him back. Started to pop a little bit with San Jose State this past season. Not a crazy year, 22 tackles, 3 PBUs, so nothing absurd. But he is somebody who, at one point in his career, was a very highly touted guy, and he's a good athlete. He moves well. Not the biggest corner in the world, 6'1", 180, but I like adding somebody with a high ceiling. There are no guarantees. I talk about this all the time. Sometimes we can get carried away with the recruiting star stuff. It doesn't really mean anything until you show up on the field and earn it. But you've got good depth in that secondary now. And if you're just stacking good athletes who have good potential, good things are going to happen for you. At least a couple of these guys are going to pan out. And you're bringing back Blocker. You bring back Dylan Phelps. I feel pretty good about the structure of this defensive roster going into the season. Now, health is going to be a big factor in all of that. Last year, obviously, was pretty devastating. Never even really got an opportunity to get their feet underneath them, because by the time week 3 rolled around, you were already missing like half the starting defense. If it's another situation like that, all bets are off at that point. But it feels like they've got good speed in the secondary. They've got good experience and size at linebacker, and I like the D-line. I like some of the guys that they have, so I'm interested to see. I will say defensive tackle is maybe a little bit worrisome. It's just hard to get impactful guys there at the G5 level, though. It really is. Like outside of quarterback, I think defensive tackle is probably the toughest position to recruit. Finally, the last of the most recent commitments, Jayden Tuia. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing that one correctly. I'll have to verify that. I will try not to call him the wrong name for the next 6 months. 6'5", 298-pound offensive guard, started at Oregon State last year. Initially was a 3-star prospect out of high school. It offers from Fresno and Nevada. A lot of offers from around here too, actually. UNC, CSU Pueblo, Adams State, Western, etc. He's from Thunder Ridge High School in Idaho Falls, Idaho. So kind of a smaller area, but obviously as somebody who got on the field, as a sophomore this past season, I think that's a pretty big pickup for CSU. I would assume he'll be a starting guard for you this season. He visited UCLA and Hawaii on top of CSU. So, there was some interest there from programs that have a little bit of juice at the moment. UCLA with the Bob Chesney hiring, and then Hawaii is kind of cooking quietly in the portal. They've brought in some nice skill guys. I would say they're my front runner to win the league next year. I think I know that a lot of people are gonna bank it all on UNLV continuing to be the hot pretty thing under Dan Mullen, and I'm sure they'll still be competitive. But I think Hawaii is going to be kind of fun to watch in the Mountain West now that we don't have to worry about their success potentially coming at CSU's expense. I'm going to be all in on the Timmy Chang, Hawaii bandwagon. I just think they're one of the brands in college football that are, when they're good, it's more fun for football fans. That's how I would phrase it. I'm a little worried about the depth overall of the offensive line. I do think, though, that they did a pretty good job in the portal. I think they got 2 starting tackles, a starting guard on top of, retaining Philip Ocon and Sione Natane and Holthouse and Braden Hales and a couple of guys that you've had in the building these last couple of years that could be kind of due for a breakout. We just won't really know until, we see them in action, right? Like, there's a world in which 2 or 3 of these guys, whether it's any of the people I just named or Zach Smith or whoever, like if those guys are able to pop and they're able to be dependable enough to feel good about the 2 deep, then you're probably going to be okay. It does kind of feel like the starting 5 should be fairly solid, but are you going to be able to withstand any type of injuries? That's always going to be the concern. That's the toughest part about building through the portal. Is it's really tough in the trenches, especially, to be able to hit right, because like the thing about O-line is, even if guys are talented individually, like you need those reps together, you need the continuity and experience, and that just takes time. It takes time and it takes practice, and that's why it's hard when you're cycling through guys every other year. It's not good for the game. It's not good for the product, but it is what it is. This is where college football is at today. I get it. I'm not gonna cry over spilled milk. We all know what it is at this point. But I think all things considered, you look at the tackles that they bring over, you look at Tua, and again, I very, very likely am mispronouncing that last name. I couldn't find any pronunciation guides or anything like that to confirm it for me online, but I'll continue to dig because I want to get that right out of respect to him. I really like this. I really like the way that this transfer class is coming together. And while I think at this time a week ago, there were some concerns about, the O-line, about running back, they went out and they addressed those. And I think that's really all that you can ask for. So pretty impressive stuff from the CSU staff so far under Jim Mora. I'm looking forward to spring and seeing some of these guys in action. Before we get out of here, you can keep the questions, comments rolling. If you want me to talk about football, recruiting, whatever, I'm glad to. I did want to talk hoops a little bit. We have not had a ton of focus on hoops of late just because they've been struggling, which has been a bummer. Another tough loss against Utah State on Friday. Really feels like you're on the verge of this season getting away from you, which would be a shame because this team is good enough to at least compete. Probably got a little too hopeful in November based off of, guys like Pasquarelli lighting it up and stuff like that. I'll admit it's easy to do. It's easy to get lost in the sauce a little bit, but I just feel like this team, despite the growth that they've had defensively, and they've been a lot better defensively in league play than they were, for long stretches there, they just continue to beat themselves with really frustrating stuff. I mean, 21 turnovers against Utah State the other night that's insane. You can't win that way, guys. Like, you just can't. Utah State had 32 points alone off of turnovers and offensive rebounds. That's absurd. CSU hit 10 threes at home. You can't lose when you're hitting 10 threes at home. But when you turn the ball over 21 times, that's how you do it. You find a way to beat yourself. And I think what's especially frustrating about what we've seen with some of these turnovers, it's not like it's the defense playing balls to the wall, making all these incredible plays. There were a couple of nice reads, a couple of instances where, Utah State defenders kind of jumped a passing lane or something like that. But also part of that falls on the passer. Pass with more intent, pass with more purpose. This lazy, sloppy, just kind of toss it It drives me insane, man. I would have had those kids running the bleachers for 2 days after that. It just it's frustrating. And you felt the loss of Nico Medved this year, just being real. Like I very much believe in Ali Farouk-Manesh's future. I think he's going to be a good head coach. I do. And this isn't the first time I've said this, but it's going to take some patience. It's his first year on the job. By the time Nico came here, he'd already had coached at 2 schools. I'd been a head coach, for over half a decade at that point. Like, you have to give him an opportunity to figure it out. Me saying that they've felt the loss of Medved, who I genuinely believe is like a top 15 coach in college basketball, that's not an indictment of Ali. Like, I want to make that very clear. I think he was the right hire. I believe in him long term. We have seen him at times look like a first-year head coach, which, to be fair, he is one. But there've been some struggles trying to figure out the rotation, and in his and the entire staff's defense, it's kind of tough to do when you've basically played 3 or 4 games with your intended roster, right? Like, between Bemba getting hurt early and then Jorgensen going down in the first Utah State game, it's put this team in a weird spot where you've had to adjust a lot on the fly. That's really challenging, one, as a first-year head coach, on top of having a roster with such little continuity from this past season. Like, they've spent all summer planning to play one way, felt pretty good about that. Plan immediately changes, week 1. That's a tough spot, and we've seen CSU struggle at times to adjust. I also feel like this team is too talented to play as poorly as they have at times in league play, and that's a bummer because, the standard is what it is at this point, and I can give some leeway, I can give some grace year 1. It's not the end of the world at this point. Your season comes down to the Mountain West tournament. We've known that for a couple of weeks, but you're getting to that point of a year where you either lean in and you really, sharpen up and you figure out some of the stuff that has really caused you to lose some winnable games. I mean, that game was there for the taking. You're up 10 points at halftime. Fresno game, there for the taking. Nevada, there for the taking. Or things just kind of compound and you see a team quit. And I doubt that'll happen just because I have too much faith in Ali, even more than like his coaching abilities, just like human to human level. Like, guys are going to want to play hard for him because he's not the kind of coach that's going to bully and scream and, break these guys down or anything like that. Like, he's such an inspiring guy that, like, I'm sure he's going to be able to get something out of him, but they've got to figure it out. And what's tough for this team right now is, like, this is not the time of the season where you want to have to be figuring out things. You got to go to Viejas and Laramie this week. Like, you're very likely staring down the barrel of 0-2. Now, Wyoming has not been trending the right direction. They started pretty hot in league play. They looked pretty formidable, kind of on a downslide here, but it's really hard to win in Laramie. And, Sundance is kind of a dork, but he's going to have that team juiced, that it'll be the one game that Wyoming fans actually show up for at the Arena Auditorium. They're just in a tough spot, man, because if you drop both of these games, you're putting yourself in a pretty significant deficit, and your odds of making any type of run in the Mountain West tournament, if you have to play day 1, are pretty much slim to none. I mean, it's hard enough to win 3 games in 3 days. It's really hard to win 4-4. It's happened. Was it New Mexico? We saw do it a couple years ago. But I do feel like this team is talented enough that they should be showing a lot more than they are. And when you see guys like Jorgensen even having, I think it was 7 turnovers in the Utah State game, like that's just not acceptable. 6 turnovers. Rechsteiner had 5. I mean, those are 2 of your most important playmakers. If you can't trust those guys to protect the ball, you're not going to be able to win very many games, especially against good teams. And that's just the reality of the situation. We need so much more from this team, if they're going to be able to compete at a consistent level. It's been tough. Now, that's the. I wanted to talk about all this because like they're not without criticism, right? The standard is higher for CSU men's basketball right now than it was when Medved took over. Because he didn't inherit a dumpster fire of a program, but he is a first-year head coach, and that's where I think you've got to give him an opportunity to kind of work through the kinks, right? You've got to figure it out, but they've got to figure out a way to cut these turnovers down because it's maddening. I know we were all spoiled all those years with Isaiah Stevens and Neek facilitated like a pro last year. I still think it's funny how much shit I took during the pre-draft process for pointing out that he could do some of that stuff, as did a lot of draft junkies. But man, I would say at least half of those turnovers against Utah State were just careless passes, and that's unacceptable. So we'll see how they respond. You're going into two incredibly hostile environments. I think it either brings the best out of you or potentially proves to be the fatal blow that kind of more or less ends the season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. You've had some big wins this year. That's the funny thing. Like that win over GCU on the road just looks better and better by the week. CU's been pretty competitive at times. Like that's a good win. They had some solid showings in the MTE. It's very confusing, the lack of consistency with this team and the slow starts. Like they keep burying themselves in these holes. That wasn't the case against Utah State. It was the opposite. But like 3 games before that, you go down and you play your way back into it. They've got to find a way to close some of these games. And maybe that's just a lack of experience. Again, we were so spoiled, like in the crunch time, just being able to put the ball in Isaiah's hands and knowing he's going to get to a spot where he's going to create an open look for someone else. And the same could be said about Neek or Roddy, back in the day. And obviously they just don't have that guy on the roster this year. But I have been disappointed. And I felt like this team, by this stage of the year, even with the injuries, they should be better than what they're showing. We'll see if they can find some consistency over the second half of the conference slate. One guy I would keep an eye on, just real quick before we get out of here, I'll do a power ranking too, I guess. Could Kyan Evans come back to CSU next year? Just throwing it out there, thinking of guys who could potentially help you with some of these, turnover issues you're having. I don't really feel like Kyan's a true point guard per se, but I do feel like he is shown, especially in this system, that he can facilitate some things for you offensively. It's not going well for him at UNC, which is a bummer. He lost his starting spot, averaged about 9 minutes a game over the last 3. So, I mean, it seems like it's pretty much done. The fans are fed up with him. It's gotten real nasty. If you look up his name on Twitter during any North Carolina game, it's just like the craziest shit you've ever seen. I mean, but that's what comes with the portal, right? I don't think anybody faults the kid. You're getting offered over $1 million to come play. You'd probably take the money too. But there's a reason that Nate Clifford told both Kyan and Jalen Crocker-Johnson to not have money be the leading factor in your decision, because the right fit is invaluable. And nobody knows that more than Nick. It's why he's in the NBA today, because he prioritized the right fit. He prioritized the right staff that was going to put him in a position to optimize his skills. And that is the exact opposite of what's happened with Kyan at UNC. I don't even put it on him. Like, they don't play to his skills at all. And I hate to see how it's played out, because he's a really talented player. I think he's a good enough 3-point shooter, a good enough athlete to have NBA capability. And it's just been a disaster at UNC, unfortunately. And I certainly would be hitting him up. I'd be sending them "you up" texts, that kind of stuff. Hey, buddy, how's it going? But I would love to see him return, because I think that Ali would put that kid in a position to thrive. And frankly, the idea of, potentially like him and maybe Rex Steiner, that's a pretty exciting, 1-2 combo with a lot of scoring possibility. I do think that him landing in Minnesota is obviously a very realistic possibility as well. But I would love to see him come back. And I know that there are some fans that would be like, no, he's a traitor. He left. We don't want him back. Well, I do, because he's a really good basketball player. And the dude got offered almost $2 million to come to UNC. You would have taken that money too. Don't be dumb. Before we get out of here, got a good question. How often do players come back to a program via the portal? Would love to see them back. It doesn't happen a ton, but it does happen. Like we've seen it a couple of times. I feel like it's more common in basketball than football for whatever it's worth. So I am interested to see if it could be on the table. I got another question here. It says, I am late, so sorry if it's been asked/answered. Any idea of when we'll get the 2026 Pac-12 football schedule announcement? I assume within the next couple of weeks, but they have to figure out what they want to do, because right now every Pac-12 team needs another conference game. And they have to decide if they are going to have teams play home and homes. Like, Texas State, for instance, CSU would play them on the road and at home. Then you would have like Boise and Utah State play a home and home, San Diego State and Fresno, etc. Washington State and Oregon State, I assume you would match up in that scenario. Or they could do a flex option, or they could try and have everybody add another game. But I would say the odds of being able to do that at this stage of the calendar are slim. Feels like the home and home is the most likely option at this point. But I would assume in the next couple of weeks, although we've heard that with Pac-12 media deal and everything else. Again, I'm still excited for the move to the Pac-12. I still feel like, given the circumstances, it was the best possible option for schools like CSU, like Boise State, like Memphis, if they would ever get on board, who have very clearly been left behind by these other leagues. Those other leagues have looked at schools like us and said, we don't want you. We're trying to make the best of a bad spot. It hasn't been a super smooth operation over the last year. You added Gonzaga, which was a huge win. That was massive. Since then, it doesn't feel like it's been a lot of dubs for the Pac-12, just being real. Again, that doesn't mean I'm against it or anything like that. I just would have hoped for a little more clarity by this stage of the process, and I think a lot of people feel that way. We'll see. We shall see. I'm going to give a brief Mountain West Hoops power ranking before we get out of here, because I haven't done one in like a month. But we'll just fly through it, then we'll get out. Keep the questions, comments, etc. rolling. If you want, we can get to a couple more before we get out of here. But starting from the bottom, going to the top, I've got Air Force at 12, San Jose State at 11, although San Jose State on any given night is a team that can be frisky, classic Tim Miles squad. They'll lose by 30 and then they'll hang against San Diego State. That's just kind of what they've been these last couple of years. They're a frisky team, but the depth just isn't there. Fresno at 10. They have their moments. They have their moments. They're trending the right direction compared to the last couple of years. It feels like they finally have an identity as a program, at least. Wyoming at 9, CSU at 8, although the matchup on Saturday probably dictates, where those teams will be next week. I've got Boise at 7, UNLV at 6. UNLV on a good day looks like they, if you had only seen UNLV play once and it was on one of their good moments, you'd be like, man, that's the best team in the league, right? They're athletic, they're versatile. Yeah, they look really good. And then if you saw them on their bad days, you'd be like, I don't think they could beat San Jose State. That's UNLV. That's just like what that program has been for the last 10 years. I've got GCU at 5, but trending upwards, Nevada 4. And then I think the top are kind of a clear cut above everybody else. And I got San Diego State 1, Utah State 2, New Mexico 3. San Diego State played a really tough non-conference slate. They've been dealing with some injuries. They are rounding into form, though. And Utah State, I kind of wonder if it's an instance of a team that peaked too early. Still think they're going to be really good. Still think they're going to make the tournament. Haven't looked quite as solid of late as they did for a long time there. And New Mexico, quietly, I think, is a team who I would put as a front runner to keep an eye on to potentially win the Mountain West tournament, because I think they're playing really good ball on both sides. Eric Olin is really doing well there, and that's the benefit of potentially hiring a veteran coach. Like when you do go with somebody inexperienced, there's going to be some lumps that come with that. That doesn't mean it's a bad decision. It just means it's a process and it's got to play out. You got to give them a chance to grow. But that's where we're at with the Mountain West power ranking. I appreciate everybody for being patient with me. I appreciate you guys for tuning in today. Don't know if this was necessarily the best podcast I've ever had, but we made it through. We made it without, me coughing so much that I threw up on screen or something like that. I am going to get out of here, though. The cold sweats are starting to kick in again, and I can feel myself getting pale. So thank you guys again for being patient. Hope to be better soon. Hope to be more active, creating content, doing what I love for you guys. But I got all the love in the world for all of you out in Ram Nation. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.